bit of controversy going on there at the moment in the presidential election campaign about Catherine Connolly and her working for banks in repossession cases. And a lot of people are critical, especially given how she's such a left-wing socialist and so on and so forth. But quite frankly, I think the criticism is unfair and misplaced. Let me say now, I have no dog in this fight, the presidential election campaign whatsoever. I'm completely indifferent as to whether Catherine Connolly or Heather Humphreys win the election. I really don't care. But the criticism about Catherine Connolly doing work for the banks as a barrister, as a professional barrister, is unfair, quite frankly, and it displays an ignorance of how the legal system works and how solicitors and barristers represent their clients as best they can. They don't make moral judgments or take up positions with clients on the basis of their beliefs or political affiliation or outlook in life. A barrister or a solicitor is obliged, professionally obliged, to give the best representation they can for their client. And whether their client is a petty thief, a drug user who has massive number of drug convictions and charges, a shoplifter, and even a rapist, a murderer, etc. Who do you think represents these people? Do you think the solicitor or the barrister who represent those people actually agree with their actions or take a moral view and say, that's okay, I can represent him because I have no issue with him engaging in frequent shoplifting and so forth? Clearly that's a nonsense argument. Solicitor or barrister will provide legal representation for their client regardless, and as Catherine Connolly said the other day in response to questions, she has acted on both sides of the pitch. Now, she didn't make it clear that she acted for banks, but she was asked about that, and she said that she basically acted for people in difficulty and she acted on the other side of the pitch as well, or something of that nature. And quite frankly, that's the way it works. That's the legal system. If a solicitor or a barrister only acted for people with whom they agreed or people that they liked, nobody facing criminal charges, serious criminal charges, would get representation, because you might say, oh, I'm not in favour of that sort of thing, shoplifting or petty crime or drug-related offences or mugging old ladies or whatever. Of course we're not in favour of that. But everybody is entitled to legal representation, and they either get it through legal aid or they pay for it, one or the other. But I mean, if Catherine Connolly did indeed, it's down the canal here now in Enfield at lunchtime, this is the harbour area, But if Catherine Connolly did represent banks, I've no difficulty with that, quite frankly. And it's just a job. What solicitors do, what barristers do, is they provide professional services to the best of their ability for their client. And whether their client is a prince or a pauper, they do their best. And I presume that would be Catherine Connolly's argument, and it is Catherine Connolly's argument. She's made that clear. She's made it clear that there's a cab rank, like a taxi rank sort of principle involved, where a barrister will take the next work, the work that comes along, take instructions from solicitors and provide the best representation they can. And whether that's defending a person or persons who are at risk of losing their home, or representing the bank who is seeking a repossession order, that's the process, that's the procedure. And I don't think it's a tenable argument, a sustainable argument, that she shouldn't do that sort of work, or she should make a moral judgment about the client etc., etc. And somebody made a point there, I was just looking on Twitter there a few minutes ago about this. Somebody made the point that if the argument that Catherine Connolly couldn't act for banks because she took a dim view of their morality and their antics in relation to repossessions and trying to get money back and so on, then the logical extension of that argument is that employees in banks would resign their positions on a point of principle, because how could they give their labour or work for a morally bankrupt organisation, if that's the argument. But of course that argument doesn't hold any water at all, and most fair people would see this controversy around Catherine Connolly representing banks in repossession cases as fake, made up controversy. And unfortunately we've another 2 weeks to go or thereabouts of controversies, and unfortunately there's only 2 candidates left, so we're looking at very intense sort of scrutiny of Heather Humphreys and Catherine Connolly in the next 2 weeks. And I suppose it's arguable that the one who ships the smallest number of controversies and blows to the reputation is likely to win. And that's why I think Heather Humphreys in the first week in the first debate didn't really get stuck in, didn't get engaged, because she felt that the best thing was to say nothing. But she came in for criticism after that, and then she got stuck in the next one. She was a bit more vigorous, a bit more active. Yeah, look, that's my view on the Catherine Connolly situation. I'm a solicitor. I take on clients. I give them good representation to the best of my ability. I don't make moral judgments about them. If I did, I'd be very, very busy trying to figure out who to represent and who not to represent. And I don't even do criminal law. But if I did, how could I act for anybody, sure? If I was making moral judgments and only representing people who were not prone to making mistakes or who were whiter than white. So that's the story. As I say, I have no fight or no dog in the fight in the presidential election. And quite frankly, I don't really care which of them wins. I'm indifferent, Catherine Connolly or Heather Humphreys. I really don't care. From a practical perspective, it's going to make no difference, quite frankly. They'll do nothing about housing because they can't. They're constrained by the Constitution as to what they can do. They can make statements and they can go off-piste slightly with statements, and there'll be a bit of brouhaha and a bit of controversy perhaps in the media, perhaps in the Dáil, like Michael D. Did he overstep the mark in relation to this, that or the other? Did he overstep the boundaries of the office? You'll have all this old nonsense, but fundamentally it's a very much a powerless position, a titular position in my view, and it'll make no difference. And for that reason I couldn't care less whether Heather Humphreys or Catherine Connolly win. But as I say, Catherine Connolly as a barrister, she's perfectly entitled, in fact she's obliged, not just entitled, to represent clients, and whether those clients are people losing their home or those clients are banks who advance money are now looking to move on the security that they took. Catherine Connolly is entitled, as I say, and obliged to act for them and to do her best, and that's what she said. And at least she had the honesty to actually come out and say it. So anyway, hope you liked the video. Hit the thumbs up button if you do. Down the canal here then, feels a bit dull today, but it's not bad. It's not bad at all, no. Nice walk down the canal here.